Hey everyone, and welcome to my wormery. I've got this bin here. It's been set up as a composting bin with red wigglers in it. And, as you can see, it's a cardboard box, which at this point I'm making the decision on, and I'm just going to go ahead and advise people not to do this because what it really results in is far too much loss of moisture from within the bin. All the moisture evaporates out through the sides. And then I guess you can always counteract that with water. I prefer to manage the moisture levels within my bins just, by adding different types of food or by keeping the bin covered or not, and not add water. So that's just my personal preference. But bottom line is cardboard box for worm bins for vermicomposting, not the best solution. So the time has come for this bin to leave the cardboard, go into the bin right beneath it, the plastic bin that you see that it's resting within. So it's not going to be a long process. I'm simply going to dump it for the most part and just kind of arrange the materials in a better way. And then hopefully the moisture that's within this and the food that they're still eating is enough to hydrate all the dry materials within the bin. This may be one occasion where I deviate from my norm and I might actually add water. But we're going to see how that looks once I break into it and we get to observe the real situation going on inside of it. Let's get this thing here on the bench so we can figure out what to do with it next. And let's aim the camera down so we can better see what we're working on here. Okay, so my idea for this was to simply invert the container and drop it right into the plastic bin as is, lock, stock, and barrel. I've got gloves on, so why don't I use them to handle some of this larger stuff. Just going to take some of these larger things out of here. These are some food bits sitting around. If they're really big pieces, I'm going to just pull them off the top here, just so they don't go rolling out of control when I go to flip this thing over. But I mean, before I proceed, you can certainly see what's happening here on the very edges, and the dryness is working its way in, and it's not the end of the world by any means. It's very dry on the far edges, but once you come in about an inch, yeah, you can see right here too, the worms don't seem to mind. So as long as they avoid that outer 1-inch perimeter, they're safe. But that is robbing them of a fair amount of volume within the container to move around. And it's also making all that material on those edges inaccessible to the worms since it's far too dry for them to venture into. So I'm going to start by extracting this here gently in the hopes that it doesn't go falling apart. It does appear that the container is holding up pretty well despite the moisture that's happening. So let's just start by emptying this container, moving the cardboard and the leaves out. It's just sort of a mishmash of bedding materials, but you can see it's remaining fairly dry under here. Curious enough to leave the bin to go explore. I'm going to put them back into the safety of the bin. Oh, here we go. Let's make sure these little guys don't get lost in the shuffle. Put them into a dry space like this and they're doomed. We don't want that to happen. Let's get all these large chunks out and then we can pour the remainder shake out of here as well. So keep them in the bin as well. Okay. Set this aside briefly and get the bin back here into center screen. So I want to be careful not to create a huge mess here. What I had envisioned was possibly being able to slide the container completely over the opening or completely over the box so that there's very little or no room for error. Let's see how it goes. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. 1, 2, 3. Not bad. So now we can see what's happening here on the bottom of the bin, and this explains how the worms got out. There is a opening here. This could be the... Alright. Let's see how the rest of this looks in here. Looks like most of it came out. There's a couple scraps, not too much. And this cardboard, I guess we'll be able to possibly use it elsewhere. For now, we're just going to set it aside. So I'm going to just begin trying to move things inboard a little bit more, away from the edges here. And as far as the overall volume is concerned, I think we're good. I don't know if it's going to be necessary to add anything to this. You can see a lot of the leaves that were already at the bottom of the bin are still here and they're still intact. So this might be adequate in terms of cover for the material underneath. Things aside a little bit, because you'll remember we did set some stuff aside that we picked out. I'm just going to want to put that back in, but this will also afford us the opportunity to take a peek at how the wormies are doing. It's like an avocado, which would definitely be a popular spot for the worms. Let's see what we see here. Yeah. They're making their way into that avocado, ripping it to shreds, not surprising. I'm trying to remember, I think this bin may have had a second avocado. Yep, there it is. I guess what I was curious of was how the pits were going to do. Pits are probably going to take some time, so we're just going to leave that off to the side. And here in the center, we're going to find a whole bunch of our friends busy at work, which looks awesome. Alright, so it's a shame that the person that had originally expressed interest in this batch of worms couldn't take them. She checked with her family to see if they would be okay with the idea of having worms living under the kitchen counter, and basically there was a resounding no from the crowd, saying we do not want worms in the house, unfortunately. So no big deal. It would have been interesting to have another one of my friends take over a batch of worms and start raising them. Yeah, you know, I mean, despite the dryness on the perimeter, I've got to say that this bin is doing just fine. There's really nothing wrong here. There's there's a pretty good sized population, which there has always been from the get-go. And there are, a fair number of tiny ones in here too, little itsy bitsy worms, barely big enough to see all over the place, which is always a good sign as well. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in these remaining food scraps that we removed from the top of the bin. I'm just going to bury that with the rest of the food. So I'm just gonna go on what we have here in terms of the moisture content that's in this bin right now. I'm not going to add any water because I don't see the situation being as dire as I had thought it could possibly be, luckily. So I'm just going to leave this dry stuff here to air out a little bit over time, and then at some point we'll be able to use it elsewhere. But for this bin, I'm going to just start putting back all the things that are going to cover up the composting action. A couple protective layers of cardboard. This piece of cardboard actually fits in here pretty nicely. Is this the more beaten up side? We'll put the more beaten up side down. It does fit in there almost perfectly. Working on this, I did also fashion another piece of cardboard that was custom made for this size. So I'm going to put this thing back on the shelf and clean up around here, but for today that's all. So we continue with this bin. It's now on day 62. I figured after 2 months of being this way it was enough of a trial to make a determination, and the determination is don't compost in cardboard boxes, which a lot of you probably knew already anyway, so nothing new here. Thanks for watching. that's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. And also consider signing up for my on my channel. And I guess we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye now.